26-year-old John Edward Jones was an avid adventurer and always loved spelunking with his family. His father frequently took him and his brother Josh on caving expeditions in Utah when they were kids. Since he was 4, he spent most of his free time exploring caves. The boys learned to love the underground depths and their dark beauty. When John became an adult, he would move to Virginia from St. George, Utah, where he met his wife, Emily Jones Sanchez. When he was 24, he decided to enroll at the University of Virginia School of Medicine to pursue a career as a pediatric cardiologist. Everything was going well for John. He was a devoted family man. He had a 1-year-old daughter, Lizzie, and his wife was heavily expecting their second child, John. On November 24, 2009, John and his family decided to travel back home to Utah to spend some relaxing holiday time with his family. They were picked up by John's younger brother Josh, who was 23 at the time. The brothers decided to rekindle their love for caving. Josh told him that the Nutty Putty Cave had been opened after having been closed before, and he had obtained a special permit. They decided that it was best to explore the cave before Thanksgiving, because they most likely would have gained weight, which would have made it difficult to fit through the narrow passageways of the cave. With all that John had going on in his life, it had been years since John was in any cave. And at 6 feet tall and 200 pounds, he wasn't the little kid he used to be. Emily, seeing John's enthusiasm, gave him the go-ahead for him and Josh to go explore the cave. After Emily left with Josh's car, the two brothers linked up with some other 9 friends and entered the cave at around 8 p.m. on November 24th. Once inside, everything went smoothly for an hour or so. The party had explored the largest room in the cave, aptly named the Big Slide. The group decided to split into 2, with some adults and 2 children opting to explore a less dangerous part of the cave, while Jones and some of the more experienced cave divers delved further into the depths of the cave. Jones was with his brother Josh when he decided to look for a particularly narrow part of the cave dubbed the birth canal. He slowly inched his way into the narrow passage head first, moving forward using his hips, stomach, and fingers. But with some of the cave still unmapped, Jones had found the wrong entrance. He wriggled forward for some time but did not see any larger area. He continued to inch forward, but the narrow passage did not come to an end. Instead, the squeeze made a sharp downward turn. Confidently, John pressed forward, perhaps noticing the tunnel got wider at the bottom. But it was already too late. He was stuck, and he had no room to turn around or wiggle his way back out the way he had come. The tiny gap was just 10 by 18 inches. This size is comparable to the opening of a front-loading washing machine, except it wasn't a perfect circle, and he was stuck in the tightest part of the opening. Jones was barely able to crawl through, having to breathe in to have any chance of moving. But when he breathed out again, he got stuck for good. What he found wasn't the birth canal at all, but an uncharted territory near Ed's Push. The crevice was not named, mainly because it was too small for most cavers to reach and map. His brother Josh, who was following him, was the first one to find John. Anxious about how much the rock had swallowed John, Josh tried to pull him out, but only managed to inch him up a little. As soon as he let John go, he slid right back into the crevice. John was stuck with one hand pinned underneath him and the other forced backward. His ankles and feet were free, but were of little use as gravity pushed him down. They both said a quick prayer, and Josh hurried back to the ground as fast as he could, slowly wiggling out of the tight passage and rushing to the surface. Once outside, he quickly called for help while their friends stayed with John. Susie Matola was the first rescuer to reach him at around 12:30 a.m. Susan was a local rescue volunteer who immediately dropped everything she was doing when she received the message and rushed to the scene with her Toyota. She arrived sometime around midnight. It had now been more than 3 hours since John had been trapped deep inside the cave. Small, agile, and quick, Susan took no time to reach John. Matola introduced herself and asked John how it was going, to which he replied, "Hi, Susie. Thanks for coming, but I want to get out." Matola assured him that he'd get out. Within the next few hours, tens and tens of rescuers arrived. The rescue team quickly brainstormed plan after plan. More than 130 people worked with sweat and blood to rescue Jones. They managed to lower a rope to him and attach a harness, but they could not pull him out. Everything changed when the rescuers finally finished installing their pulley system and started pulling John out. They worked in an 8-man tandem, all tugging as one. John was at times in great pain, so they made frequent pauses. But each time they pulled, they managed to pull John up a bit more. After pulling him upwards the 3rd time, John was finally lifted high enough so that he could make eye contact with the rescuer closest to him. He looked tired, his eyes were red, and his face was dirty, but he seemed fine otherwise. The rescuer saw that, even though John was complaining, he had a smile on his face. They had another rest, then decided to continue pulling John up. He was almost out. When the rescue team pulled John upward for the 4th time, something happened. The entire team fell backward as the rope suddenly went loose in their hands. The closest rescuer felt something hard hit his face, and he passed out for a second. When he came, he saw nothing but dust. Once the dust settled a bit, he realized the stone arch near John's legs where the rope was tied around had shattered and the nearest key bolt had broken off. He couldn't make out in the dust where exactly John was, but soon he realized John had slid right down the crevice again, this time seemingly even deeper than before. As the rescuer suffered severe facial injuries from the impact with a metal carabiner and couldn't continue his rescue efforts, he had to switch places with his dad, who was also on the rescue team. When he reached John, he realized that John's breathing was much more shallow and less frequent, and he was struggling to stay alive. The rescuer called for John but received no response. Desperate, he tried to lower himself into the crevice to put the rope around John's waist, but got stuck himself. After finally wriggling himself free, he drilled a new hole for the pulley and crawled out of the cave, exhausted, to be replaced by yet another rescuer, who reached John but couldn't make contact with him. The cave had such dangerously narrow passages that the rescuers were faced with an impossible rescue. They also tried to drill a hole in the rock to create more room, but they ran out of time. The downward angle at which John was trapped was putting great stress on his body. At one point, they brought a 2-way cable radio into the cave and managed to lower it to him so he could speak with his wife, who was near the cave entrance on the surface. They were both agitated, but they comforted each other. His time was running out. His heart had to work incredibly hard to continuously pump blood out of the brain, and since he was upside down, his heart couldn't take the load. His entire system began to fail. Blood and fluids pooled in John's brain and lungs. His circulation slowed, capillaries leaked, and toxins built up in his blood. Soon after, a medical doctor was able to reach him at the cave, and he was pronounced dead due to cardiac arrest, shortly before midnight on the evening of November 25, 2019. There were 27 rough hours of failed attempts at rescue, 27 agonizing waiting hours for John's family, and 27 hours of emotional strain for the rescuers. They were close enough to see John and save him, only to lose him in the end. But they had done their best. John's family had given them their utmost thanks, even after hearing the horrible news of John's passing. It was tragic for both John's family and the rescuers. They knew then that they would never get him out. They only had to give him drugs to calm him. "I'm going to die right here. I'm not going to come out of here, am I?" were John's last words. The realization of dying upside down with his whole family just outside of the cave he was stuck in was enough horror for a good man like him. "I know you've been pushing so hard for so long. Why don't you rest for a minute and take a break, and then you can push again," his wife had said, but John was already unconscious and he never woke up again. The Nutty Putty Cave, where John Edward Jones spent the last 27 hours of his life, became his final resting place. The Nutty Putty Cave was closed to the public after the incident and sealed with concrete in 2010. Jones's body remains inside the cave as it was deemed too risky to retrieve it. His family and friends held a memorial service for him and erected a plaque near the entrance of the cave. Nowadays, the cave has a special spot where John's family can honor him on Memorial Day. The Nutty Putty Cave incident was one of the most tragic and heartbreaking cave accidents in history. It serves as a reminder of the dangers and risks of caving and the importance of following safety precautions and guidelines. It also shows the courage and dedication of the rescuers who tried to save Jones and the love and faith of his family and friends who mourned him.